The call came on a Tuesday morning and Warren Calloway almost didn't answer it. Wait, that's a name from the list. Let me go straight into the story. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning and Lorne Duchesne almost deleted it without reading past the subject line. Pinnacle Security Group, Elite Protection Division, Open Tryout, Calgary. He was elbow-deep in his daughter's lunchbox at the time, trying to scrape the last of the peanut butter out of the jar because he'd forgotten to pick up groceries again. Emmy was sitting at the kitchen table in her school uniform, coloring a horse with a purple marker, occasionally looking up at him the way 6-year-olds do when they're pretending not to care about something they desperately care about. "You gonna be home when I get back?" she asked without looking up from the horse. "Always am," Lorne said. She pressed the marker harder into the paper. "You said that on Thursday and you weren't." He didn't have a good answer for Thursday. He'd run late at the loading dock and the school had called and Mrs. Pellerin from next door had picked Emmy up, and the whole drive home Emmy had sat in the back seat of a stranger's Subaru, holding her backpack on her lap, not saying a word. He knew because Mrs. Pellerin had told him. Emmy hadn't mentioned it once. That was the thing about his daughter. She didn't complain. She just got quieter. Lorne Duchesne was 41 years old. He had the kind of face that didn't tell you much. Medium height, ordinary build, a bit of gray coming in at the temples that he kept meaning to deal with. He wore the same 3 work shirts on rotation, had a scar across his left forearm from an incident he didn't talk about, and made Emmy's lunch every morning even when he had nothing to put in it. He'd been working the overnight logistics shift at a warehouse outside Red Deer for the past 14 months. The pay was decent, the hours were destroying him. He'd been something else once, but that was a long time ago. He read the email a second time on the bus to work. Pinnacle Security Group was one of the most respected private protection firms in Western Canada. The kind of outfit that didn't advertise, didn't run billboards, didn't have a splashy website. Their clients were executives, government officials, people who needed the sort of discretion that couldn't be faked. The open tryout was unusual. Someone had told him about it, an old contact from a life he'd left, and apparently they'd forwarded his name along with a brief note. The email said only, "We were told to expect you. Friday 0800, Beltline District, dress casual." He should have closed the email and gone back to work. Instead, he filled out the form at the bottom and hit send before he could think himself out of it. He did not tell Emmy where he was going on Friday morning. He told her he had an appointment downtown and that Mrs. Pellerin would drop her at school. Emmy had looked at him steadily over her cereal bowl, the way she sometimes did when she was deciding whether to believe something. "What kind of appointment?" she asked. "The kind where they see if I'm good enough," he said. She considered this. Then she went back to her cereal. "You're good enough," she said matter-of-factly, as though it were a fact she'd already verified and filed away. He drove downtown in his truck with the cracked dashboard and parked 2 blocks from the address on the email. The building was a converted warehouse space, all exposed concrete and high ceilings, the kind of place that had been something industrial and was now something deliberate. There were 12 other men in the waiting area when Lorne arrived. Maybe 13. They were the kind of men who looked like what they were. Big, composed, professionally built. Several of them had that particular quality of stillness that comes from spending years learning how not to move unnecessarily, the kind of stillness that advertises itself. A few had visible security credentials clipped to their jackets. Most of them were in their late 20s or early 30s, the peak of whatever trajectory they were on. Lorne was wearing a gray canvas jacket and carrying a bag with his daughter's spare library book in it because he'd grabbed the wrong bag off the hook. A man with a clipboard looked him over the way a customs officer looks at a passport. Not hostile exactly, but professionally skeptical. Name Duchesne, Lorne Duchesne. The man found the name, made a mark. He looked up again, taking in the jacket, the bag, the cracked boots. "First time here?" "Yes, any formal security or protection experience?" "Some," Lorne said. The man waited as though expecting elaboration. Lorne didn't provide any. He was directed to a row of chairs along the wall. He sat. The man to his left was built like a defensive lineman and was reviewing what appeared to be a laminated training certification. The man to his right was a few years younger, had a crew cut, and was wearing a compression shirt that left very little about his physique to the imagination. Neither of them acknowledged Lorne's existence, which was fine. After a few minutes, the compression shirt man glanced over, looked at the bag, looked at Lorne. "You in the right place?" he asked. "Think so," Lorne said. "This is the Pinnacle tryout, I know." The man seemed to consider whether to say something further. He looked at the bag again. The library book inside was something about horses. Emmy had been in a horse phase for 3 months. And something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smirk, more like a decision. "These spots are pretty competitive," he said. "Guys here have serious backgrounds." "Good to know," Lorne said. "Just saying. No shame in knowing when something's not for you. Lorne said nothing. He looked at the wall across from him, where there was an architectural drawing of a building that was probably not this building, and waited. The woman who ran Pinnacle Security Group was named Vivienne Okafor-Styles, and she did not look like what most people expected when they pictured a CEO. She was 47, Nigerian-Canadian, had a mathematics degree from Dalhousie and a second degree in criminology from Simon Fraser, and had spent 11 years working for a firm in Ottawa before starting Pinnacle with 2 employees and a very clear sense of what she was trying to build. The firm now had 63 staff and a client list that she did not discuss. She had been the target of 2 credible threats in the past 4 years, which had sharpened her interest in who exactly was guarding her back. She stood at the front of the room when the candidates were brought in and watched them settle. Watched how they sat, how they scanned the room, where their eyes went first. It told her things that resumes didn't. She watched the man in the gray jacket set his bag down under his chair and sit with his hands loosely on his knees, looking forward. He hadn't glanced at the other candidates again since sitting down. He wasn't performing calm. He just was calm. It was a different thing entirely, and she'd been in this industry long enough to know the difference. She didn't say anything, she just made a note. The assessment coordinator, a compact, efficient woman named Trish, ran through the overview, 3 stages. Physical assessment, tactical judgment scenarios, and a personal interview with Ms. Okafor-Styles. Not everyone would advance between stages. Questions were not taken at this time. There were 13 candidates, 2 spots. The physical assessment was first. It began with the standard battery, functional fitness, agility, reaction time. Lorne moved through it without incident, without flourish, finishing in the middle of the group. He wasn't the fastest, he wasn't the most impressive. He was quiet and economical about everything he did, like a man who had learned not to spend more than necessary. The compression shirt man, his name was apparently Trevor Haas, which he had mentioned twice in proximity to others, was fast and knew he was fast. He had good form and a quality about him that might charitably be called intensity, and less charitably be called a need for an audience. The large man from the waiting area, whose name turned out to be Gareth Mullen, was slower but immovable, the kind of mass that simply didn't give way. He had 2 full inches and at least 60 pounds on everyone else in the room. And then there was the combat assessment. Trish explained it without ceremony. Controlled sparring, not about winning, about how candidates handled pressure, contact, unpredictability. There would be one-on-one pairings, rotated. Standard protective gear, 3 minutes per round. Lorne Duchesne laced up his gloves and waited. His first 2 pairings were unremarkable, or seemed so to the people watching. He neither dominated nor lost. He moved conservatively, let his partner come to him neutralized. The men he faced were good enough to be there and walked away without damage. Lorne's expression didn't change throughout. Trish made a note on her board. Vivienne Okafor-Styles, watching from the side of the room, tilted her head very slightly. Trevor Haas had been watching too. "Hey Trish," he said, during the pause between rotations loud enough to carry, "can I request a specific pairing?" Trish looked up. "For what reason? I want to go with the warehouse guy." He nodded toward Lorne. "Seems like he's coasting." There was a beat of silence in the room. Trish looked at Lorne. "You have a preference?" "No," Lorne said. Trevor rolled his shoulders and stepped into the center of the floor. He had a compact confidence, the kind that had been rewarded enough times to become assumption. He'd been a competitive MMA amateur, he'd mentioned, and had placed regionally. He was 8 years younger than Lorne and roughly 20 pounds heavier in the kind of weight that moved quickly. "You sure you want to do this?" he said, not unkindly. "I'm going a bit harder than the others." "That's okay," Lorne said. "Just don't want you to embarrass yourself." He said it with what he probably thought was consideration. Lorne looked at him. "I won't," he said simply. The bell rang, or the sound of Trish's stopwatch, which served the same purpose. Trevor came in the way men with good training come in. Controlled aggression, a measured combination, reading the distance. It was genuinely good technique. And then something happened, and it happened fast enough that several people in the room weren't sure what they'd seen. Lorne didn't retreat. He slipped, just barely, fractionally, the kind of micro-movement that redirects rather than avoids, and instead of blocking, he deflected, and the angle he created was wrong for Trevor in a way that Trevor's body understood before his mind did. What followed took maybe 3 seconds. Trevor went down to the mat with controlled but decisive force, and Lorne stepped back and stood still, and the room was absolutely quiet. Trevor lay there for a moment. He was not injured. He was, however, staring at the ceiling with an expression that was working very hard to process what had just occurred. Gareth Mullen, from across the room, let out a short breath through his nose that might have been a laugh. Trish looked down at her board, looked up. Vivienne Okafor-Styles was very still on the side of the room. Her arms, which had been crossed, slowly lowered to her sides. Trevor got up. He was to his credit not belligerent about it. He seemed, if anything, genuinely confused, the way a person is confused when they run a calculation and get an answer that shouldn't be possible. He nodded once at Lorne. It wasn't graciousness exactly, it was recalibration. Lorne nodded back and walked to the edge of the mat for water. Trish called the rotation. The interview was in a small room off the main floor. A table, 2 chairs, a single window looking out onto a parking structure. Vivian Okafor-Styles sat across from Lorne Duchesne and looked at him the way she'd been looking at people for 25 years of professional assessment. "Walk me through your background," she said. 14 months at Redstone Logistics. Before that, about a year with my daughter after my wife passed. Before that, 8 years with Joint Task Force 2. She didn't react to the name, though it meant something. JTF-2 was the Canadian Armed Forces' most specialized counter-terrorism unit. It was not a thing that appeared on many resumes because people who had served there were not typically in the habit of mentioning it. "Why logistics?" she asked. Hours matched Emmy's school day. "For a while. Emmy is your daughter? She's 6, she has a horse phase. It may be permanent." Something moved across Vivian Okafor-Styles' face that might have been the beginning of a smile, and then she returned to the matter at hand. "Why Pinnacle?" she asked. He thought about it, not performing thought, actually thinking. "I'm good at this," he said. "I was built for it. I spent 8 years doing it at the highest level, and I'm 30 years from retirement, and I've been moving freight pallets in the dark for 14 months because it was the first thing that fit around a 6-year-old's lunch schedule. My daughter deserves a father who's present. She also deserves a father who doesn't come home exhausted and defeated every morning. I'd like to find a way to be both things." He paused. "And you have a real threat environment. You're not a ceremonial operation. I don't want to be decorative." Vivienne looked at him for a long moment. "How did you know about the threat environment?" she said. "The open tryout is unusual for your firm. You do things internally, from referrals. You wouldn't change that without a reason. The fact that you're bringing in outside people at the senior protection level means you don't feel covered. That means something specific has changed." She was quiet. "You're not wrong," she said finally. "Emmy was at Mrs. Pellerin's when Lorne got back to Red Deer. He picked her up at 5:30 and she came to the door with a painting she'd apparently made. A horse, purple again, on a sheet of construction paper that also featured what appeared to be a large house. "Who lives in the house?" he asked as they walked to the truck. "Oos," she said. "When we have a bigger one." He helped her into her seat. She held the painting on her lap, careful not to wrinkle it. "How was the appointment?" she asked. "Good," he said. "Really good, actually." She nodded like this confirmed what she'd already decided. "I told you," she said. He didn't hear back for 4 days. On the 5th day, Vivian Okafor-Styles called him directly, not through any admin or coordinator. She spoke without preamble. "I'd like to offer you a position. Senior Protection Detail, Calgary-based. There's flexibility in the schedule structure for your daughter's situation. Compensation is at the rate I'm sending you now." A pause. "I'll be honest, I haven't offered a position this quickly after a tryout in 11 years. Lorne was standing in the kitchen making Emmy's lunch. He had the phone wedged between his shoulder and his ear, and he was scraping the last of the peanut butter out of the jar because he'd again forgotten groceries. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course. When did you decide? Was it the floor?" Another pause. When Vivian spoke again, her voice had a different quality to it. Not warmer exactly, but more direct. "Honest. It was before the floor," she said. "It was watching you sit in that room with 12 men performing me, and you were the only one who wasn't." Lorne set the knife down on the counter. "I'll take it," he said. What nobody in that room had known, what even the man with the clipboard hadn't been told, was that Lorne Duchesne had spent 8 years with a unit that didn't officially exist in any public document. That the incident that gave him the scar on his arm had also given him a commendation that was classified at a level most people in civilian life would never encounter. That he'd learned 3 things in that unit that he believed more completely than anything else. That preparation is invisible until it matters, that noise is almost always a distraction from what's actually happening, and that the most dangerous person in any room is usually the one you haven't clocked yet. He also knew, and this had served him just as well, that none of that history made him a good father. The history just made him capable of protecting things. What made him a good father was choosing every morning to be there when Emmy woke up, to make her lunch even when the jar was empty, to answer the question about the appointment honestly, even when it scared him, because his daughter had already lost one parent and she needed to know that honesty was still a thing adults were capable of. There were 3 months between the Friday of the tryout and Lorne Duchesne's first day at Pinnacle Security Group. In those 3 months he gave his notice at the warehouse, rearranged his schedule so that Emmy was never waiting on a stranger to pick her up from school again, and bought a full jar of peanut butter and then 2 backups, which he lined up in the cupboard in a way that Emmy found extremely funny. "Why do we have so much peanut butter?" she asked. "Insurance," he said. She thought about this. "Insurance against what?" "Against Tuesdays," he said. She laughed. It was the kind of laugh that landed in his chest and stayed there. On his first day at Pinnacle, Vivian Okafor-Styles walked him through the building, the protocols, the client situation. She was precise and unhurried, the kind of person who doesn't waste motion or language. At the end of the walkthrough, they were standing at the window of her office, looking out over the Beltline. "One thing," she said, "the people on your detail are going to ask about your background eventually. Some of them were in that room during the tryout and they remember what happened." "Okay," he said. "Do you want me to brief them, or do you want to?" He thought about it. "Neither," he said. "They'll know what they need to know when they need to know it." She looked at him. "That's how you operated before," she said. It wasn't a question. "It's the only way that works," he said. She nodded once, the kind of nod that is agreement and acknowledgement at the same time, and turned back to the window. "Trevor Haas, by the way," she said without particular emphasis. "He called to ask if he could reapply in 6 months. What did you tell him?" "That I'd think about it." She paused. "I probably will hire him eventually. He's good. He just needs to spend some time learning what he doesn't know." Lorne said nothing, which was the correct response. "Your daughter's school pickup is at 3:15, Vivian said. 3:20 now. They changed it in September. Your schedule will accommodate it." She said it like a fact rather than a concession. "I've already adjusted the rotation." He looked at her. "Thank you," he said. "It's not generosity," she said without heat. "It's practical. You're no good to me if your head is somewhere else at 2:50 every afternoon. People with children in this work, the good ones, they're more focused, not less. They have more to lose." She turned back to the window. "I have 2 of my own, for what it's worth. They're grown now. But I remember. Emmy Duchesne found out her father had a new job on a Thursday, not a Tuesday this time, when he picked her up at 3:20 and she noticed that he was wearing a different jacket, dark-fitted, the kind of jacket that didn't come from the same rotation as the gray canvas one. "You look different," she said. "New job started today," he told her. She studied his face with the thoroughness that 6-year-olds reserve for things they've already decided are important. "Is it a good one?" "Yeah," he said. "Really good. Do you get to help people?" He thought about that. About the way Vivian had said, "I have a real threat environment," and the way she'd said, "I've already adjusted the rotation," and the way none of that was separate from Emmy standing in front of him asking whether her father got to help people. "Yeah," he said again. "That's exactly what it is." She slipped her hand into his, the hand on the side without the scar which she always chose without ever being told why, and they walked to the truck. On the back seat, still there from 4 days ago, was the purple horse painting. The house was still on it. The 2 figures in front of the house were still there too. A tall one and a small one, rendered in the uncomplicated honesty of a 6-year-old's hand. It looked, if you tilted your head at the right angle, exactly like a home.